On the news, at least 5 killed in gunmen attack on Yobe and Taraba states. ECOWAS supports Nigeria's border closure. And 4 migrants die crossing the Mediterranean to Spain. Many thanks for joining us on News Now on TV360 Nigeria. I am Annetta Felix. At least 5 people have been killed after gunmen invaded communities in Karim Lamido local government area of Taraba State. Those killed are 2 village heads, the chairman of a vigilante group, and 2 other persons. The police command in Taraba State is yet to confirm the incident, but chairman of the council told newsmen that about 30 gunmen invaded 2 communities and killed the village heads of Bailango 1 and Bailango 2 in Old Muri Chiefdom on Monday night. The gunmen also allegedly abducted the 3 children of the slain vigilante leader. Meanwhile, Commissioner of Police in Yobe State, Abubakar Shahobu, has confirmed that suspected Boko Haram insurgents have launched an attack on Yobe State. According to Shahobu, the suspected insurgents were clad in army camouflage and drove in 9 Toyota Hilux to Babangida, the headquarters of Tamua Local Government Council, and started shooting sporadically. The police commissioner, however, added that the situation is now calm, while assuring residents that they will get to the bottom of the matter. And still on security matters, the Nigerian Army has released 983 persons from their custody after clearing them of alleged links with Boko Haram terrorists. Theater Commander of Operation Lafia Dole, Major General Olusegun Adeniyi, handed over the detainees to the Borno State Government, Babagana Omar Zulum, in a ceremony in Maiduguri on Wednesday. Adeniyi said the men were released after months of investigations proved them innocent of terrorist affiliations. At the ceremony, Governor Zulum applauded the military for releasing the men and assured that the state would rehabilitate them before reuniting them with their families. The International Committee of the Red Cross, ICRC, had published a report claiming that Nigeria has the highest number of missing persons registered with the organization in any country. They claim that 22,000 people have disappeared since 2009 in northeast Nigeria and allege that they could be in the custody of the Nigerian army following raids over suspicion of allegiance to Boko Haram. The Chief of Army Staff, Lieutenant General Tukur Buratai, is advocating for an interagency collaboration for the rehabilitation of repentant Boko Haram fighters. Buratai made the demand at a 2-day roundtable discussion on disarmament, demobilization and reintegration, peace building and reconciliation in the Northeast held in Abuja. The program was organized by the Nigeria Army Resource Center in conjunction with NIM Foundation. Buratai says this collaboration will ensure that insurgents do not return to unleashing terror on innocent Nigerians and also encouraging those still fighting to surrender.
We must please remind ourselves and constantly remember how this crisis began. I have seen a friend of mine on the Islamic front, and I'm happy that he's here. We must critically examine what went wrong that led to this crisis, so as to ensure that we do not get there by any out of formation or commission.
We've taken custody of hundreds of them, of these fighters. Now, many of them are willing to surrender. So in this case, I see the right time and the right mechanism to be put in place to ensure that this process is commenced. And the disarmament in this context also will require heightened military activity to be able to forcefully disarm the terrorists. And this we are doing.
This therefore calls for understanding, assistance, and collaboration from all quarters with the Northeast. Assure that all the Northeast General Commission is desirous of working with all well-meaning organizations for the benefit of not only the affected areas of the Northeast in particular, but for the peace and security to prevail in the entire nation in general.
The ECOWAS Parliament has backed Nigeria's land border security drills with its neighboring countries, stating that no country is allowed to import into another country what it does not produce. The legislators adopted the move at the 2019 Second Ordinary Session of the ECOWAS Parliament in Abuja. This is sequel to the reaction from other member countries after the representatives of Nigeria and Ghana to the ECOWAS Parliament, Ibrahim Sadiq, presented Nigeria's report during the plenary with the border closure as one of the thematic issues. The issue was deliberated upon, after which they adopted the border closure on the grounds of prevailing massive smuggling activities taking place in that corridor.
No country in the ECOWAS sub-region is allowed to export into another country what it does not produce. Meaning, by our own actions, we want to be self-sufficient. We do not want to be dumping grounds. We want to encourage production. And we cannot be subservient any longer at this time to what they call the superpowers of the nation, of the world. They will produce, have it stale for a very long period of time. After a while, they use our conduit to take to our own countries. This is not acceptable to Nigeria. Mr. Speaker, respected colleagues, I want to say from the close of this border, Nigeria have started seeing some changes in terms of security advantages.
Benin Republic is the 6th largest importer of rice in the world, and Benin Republic have just 11 million people. So where is the rice going to? The rice is obviously coming to Nigeria. If it was only rice, we could even understand. But that rice comes with arms. Boko Haram through Niger, the other groups from Benin, everybody is getting arms from there. So we cannot fold our arms and see Nigeria destroyed. We cannot fold our arms and see agriculture in Nigeria destroyed. Agriculture is the largest employer of labor in Nigeria. Over 75% of Nigerians are in agriculture. More than 50% of Nigerians live in rural areas. Now, if you grow your agriculture, it means that you are creating jobs for the jobless Nigerians.
Senator Dino Melaye of the People's Democratic Party has submitted a fresh petition against the conduct of the Kogi state elections. The PDP candidate in Saturday's supplementary election for the Kogi West senatorial seat wants the exercise to be cancelled over what he describes as intimidation of voters and violence in the first conduct of the poll. Melaye says the Senate needs to begin acting on his petition rather than prepare for a supplementary poll. The PDP candidate says INEC needs to postpone the exercise, alleging that the electoral umpire did not include some of the polling units that were cancelled during the November 16th election in the forthcoming supplementary poll. The Economic and Financial Crimes Commission, EFCC, is asking Nigerians to disregard reports that it has dropped the criminal charge against the former Minister of Petroleum Resources, Desiani Alison Madueke, and other persons indicted for money laundering. The commission maintained that the case is still before Justice Muslim Hassan of the Federal High Court in Lagos and that it never withdrew it. They said the only development was that the commission took a prosecutorial decision to split the initial 14 counts charge to enable separate arraignment of the defendants. The EFCC says it took that decision following a spate of adjournment that prevented the arraignment of the defendants more than 1 year after the case was listed. The charges were first filed on November 28, 2018, and since then, every attempt to arraign the defendant had been frustrated by one excuse or the other. Desiani and her accomplices are standing trial for an illegal transaction valued at $153 million. Meanwhile, former Inspector General of Police Suleiman Arase is advising Nigeria's security agencies against carrying out media trials while delivering a keynote address at the 3rd annual general meeting of the Association of Licensed Private Security Practitioners of Nigeria. He said the increasing incidence of media trial is only making a mess of criminal investigations and frustrating the successful trial of criminal suspects. The former police boss said effective training for security personnel was therefore crucial to make for effective police work in the country. On his part, Deputy Senate President Ovio Magege and the National President of the ALPSPN, Davidson Akime, stressed the need for workable solutions to the country's security challenges.
Community policing is about trust. I'm sure those of you who traveled by road for this conference, you will discover that all our roads have been blocked by logs, tires, and you start asking yourself, if you want to win the trust of the people, do you have to inconvenience them for that? You don't have to inconvenience them. Because when you are talking about community policing, you are thinking about winning the hearts and minds of the people. And if you are going to win the hearts and minds of the people, you don't cause another additional hardship to them. So I will advise Adamo. Adamo is a cosmopolitan police officer. He's obeying. He was in the United Nations office for a very long while. So I would expect that under his watch, those things should not happen. So the entire subject may mean having police physical visibility. It must not be an order of overbearing police presence with personnel toting all kinds of assault rifles. Rather, community policing must be the clear evidence that the police force is a civil and not a military force.
There's nowhere in the world where community policing has existed without a participation and contribution from the private sector, especially the private security sector. So that's the reason we are doing this today, in order to drive home the point, the need for private security participation in our national security efforts.
Civil society groups on Wednesday stormed the National Assembly complex to protest against the proposed hate speech and social media bills. With different placards and banners denouncing both bills, the protesters described the plan to regulate social media and curb hate speech in the country as a disguise to infringe on the rights of Nigerians to free speech. The social media bill scaled second reading last week with support from a majority of the Senate, despite opposition to the proposed legislation by many Nigerians.
We want to draw the attention of the National Assembly, both the red chamber and the green chamber, to the provision of Section 24 of the Cybercrime Act of 2015. That section of the Act of the National Assembly has expressly, captured all the provisions that the social media bill and the hate speech bill, ought to capture. So we believe that it's an overreach and an overkill, and that this will only land the country in deep troubles.
Meanwhile, another group, the Resource Center for Human Rights and Civil Education, has cautioned the champions of the hate speech bill against the move. At a press briefing in Abuja, Executive Director of the center, Ibrahim Zilukulari, warned that the consequences of the move will be rather dire and regrettable.
The rabid champions of this legislation do not seem to realize that if they do not tread with caution, they could someday become victims of the very legislation which they are attempting to enact to harass other citizens. Krasser wishes to admonish the arrowheads of these discredited beasts to rather shift their focus to more productive ventures, including legislating to tackle dilapidated infrastructure, collapsed education system, poverty, crimes, unemployment, corruption, and terrorism.
Lawmakers in the Nigerian Senate want the federal government to ensure adequate funding of the National Agency for the Control of AIDS, NACA, to fight and control the spread of the human immunodeficiency virus, HIV, in the country. This was part of the resolutions during plenary on Wednesday after the consideration of a motion to mark the World AIDS Day, sponsored by Senator Tukur. Utazi raised concerns that intervention funders may soon begin to leave Nigeria for other countries where the deadly virus is yet to be kept at bay. The upper chamber also appealed to Nigerians not to discriminate against persons living with the virus and called on the private sector to partner with the government to fund the exercise.
It's the naked truth that the usual funding from foreign donors will equally shrink, leaving Nigeria to battle 37 over 37 in funding the management and care of people living with HIV, and therefore necessitates putting in place mechanisms to ensure that resources are available for continuity. This Senate worried about the sustainability of the fight against HIV infection and control in Nigeria, as it is anticipated that someday the funding partners may pull out of the country. It becomes imperative that private sector involvement in raising the needed funds to support the government at the federal and state levels.
Governments too must still, continually fund, funding so that we don't have a relapse of the disease, so that our people don't get infected. We have had different demographics, just like he said, in this country. The northern part of this country, the south, in fact, even states where we have found out that the prevalence rate has been very high. I think we don't want to mention those ones now so that they don't get stigmatized.
Nigeria records over 4 million injuries and more than 2,000 deaths annually as a result of road crashes. Chairperson of the Trauma Care International Foundation, TCIF, Jola Phillips, said this during the 2019 Trauma Conference, tagged Trauma Care, the Way Forward. The conference was put together by the TCIF as a solution-based convention to emphasize the possibility of an absolutely adequate system for trauma care and emergency response in Nigeria and West Africa. On his part, Chairman Senate Committee on Health, Senator Ibrahim Olorigbe, who was represented by Mike Ebo, the country director of USAID, noted that appropriate and timely care given early could significantly improve outcome from trauma care. Ebo cited the National Health Act 2014, which provides that a healthcare provider, health worker or health establishment shall not refuse a person emergency medical treatment for any reason. He further said anyone who contravened this section committed an offense and is liable on conviction to a fine of 100,000 naira or imprisonment for a period not exceeding 6 months or to both. You're still watching news now on TV360 Nigeria. Onya Adekunle is now standing by for business after this. You're welcome back. Now time for business with Oyi Adekunle. Hello, Oyi.
Hi, Anita.
Well, the CBN governor has been warning that this next news you're about to tell us is no cause for alarm. But that doesn't take away from the fact that the Nigeria's foreign reserves has actually slumped. Please let us know how bad is that?
Well, thank you, Aneta, for giving that tip. The nation's foreign exchange reserves have slumped below the $40 billion mark, hitting the lowest level in 22 months. And this is according to the latest report from the Central Bank of Nigeria. The external reserves, which have been on a downward trajectory in recent times, dipped by over $5 billion in the last 5 months. The reserve rose to a high of $45.18 billion in June 2019, but fell to $44.9 billion in July and later went to $43.61 billion in August. The biggest monthly decline was recorded in September as the reserves shed $1.76 billion to close at $41.85 billion and further dropped to $40.46 billion as of October 31st. According to the CBN data, as of November 25, 2019, the reserve stood at $39.88 billion, and that's the lowest level since January 18, 2018. Oil prices slipped on Wednesday after an industry report showed a surprise build-up in U.S. crude inventories, but optimism surrounding the signing of the first phase of a U.S.-China trade deal prevented a bigger slide in prices. Brent crude futures dropped 9 cents to $64.18 a barrel, while West Texas Intermediate crude futures fell 12 cents to $58.29 per barrel. Wednesday's decline reversed 2 days of gains, with WTI climbing 1.1% through Tuesday and Brent gaining 1.4% during the period. That's on the expectation that China and the United States, the world's two biggest crude oil users, would soon sign a preliminary agreement beginning an end to their 16-month trade war. Let's now take a break here and return with a review of activities on the stock market. Please stay tuned. Midweek trading at the Nigerian Stock Exchange closed in the negative territory after bears put an end to the reign of the bulls yesterday. The momentum was sustained today as the all-share index, which opened at 26,883 basis points, dropped 93 points, which represents a 0.35% decline. Similarly, the market capitalization also closed at 12.930 trillion naira today. This, when compared to the total yesterday, we realized that investors lost about 45 billion naira today. Let's now take a look at the summary of market activities for today. In all, there were 26 losers versus 19 gainers, and we see just how that played out on the transaction chart. The total units of shares traded today was 189.860 million units of shares, of course, and the sum of that came in at 1.4 billion naira. We actually see from this that the market witnessed fewer sell-offs today, because as of yesterday, this particular value, which is 1.4 today, stood at 3.1 billion naira. But moving on now to the equities that impacted the downturn recorded in the market today. On the top list of 26 is Cadbury, followed by GlaxoSmithKline with a combined loss of 14 kobo or 17.68%, and the share price of First Bank of Nigeria Holdings as well as Dangote Cement also took a nosedive. First Bank went from selling at 6 naira 95 kobo to 6 naira 50 kobo today, and of course same thing for Dangote Cement, which whose share price actually declined by 40 kobo. Now, despite these losses, Zenith Bank snatched the top gainers from MTN Nigeria, leading the pack today with an increase of 15 kobo, and of course we see Curtix PLC of the industrial goods sector also chalked up gains to the tune of 11 kobo. Airtel and Guarantee Trust Bank comes in third and fourth place, completing the top the list of 4 gainers today. Now, moving on to the foreign scene, let's see what it looks like today. Of course, all in the greens. FTSE hits highest level since August amid trade deal hopes, and of course we know that with that it's almost quite easy to predict the performance of the Dow Jones as well. Trade optimism also pushed US markets higher, and of course Nikkei was not left behind in the wins as the market closed in the positive territory as well, with a 0.28% rise. And that's it from here. It's back to you, Aneta.
Thanks for that update, Oyi. And now on the foreign scene, Spanish Coast Guards say 4 migrants have died and more than a dozen have been declared missing after a packed dinghy ran into trouble while trying to reach Spain. A Spanish Coast Guard boat managed to save 58 migrants, including 3 children, late on Tuesday from the dinghy drifting in the Alboran Sea, about 50 kilometers, and that's 30 miles north of Spain's North African enclave of Melilla. The rescued migrants were taken to Melilla along with the bodies of 3 men who died during the attempts to reach Spain. Spain is the main entry point for migrants seeking a better life in Europe, and more than 27,000 migrants have arrived by land or sea in the country so far this year, and that represents a 50.7% drop compared to 2018, when Spain for the first time surpassed Italy to become the main entry point for migrants arriving in Europe. And in sports, reigning African champions Nigeria, the Tigers, will face world number 1 United States of America, Serbia and Mozambique in the battle for a spot at the 2020 Olympic Games in Tokyo. This was revealed at a brief ceremony held in Switzerland on Wednesday to officially kickstart the Olympics tournament's qualification race. The Tigers will play in Belgrade after being drawn in Group A. Reacting to the draw, the Nigeria Basketball Federation President Musa Kida said qualification for the 2020 Olympics is still possible, despite admitting that it was a difficult draw. Meanwhile, the national men's team, the Tigers, have already secured their place in the men's category of the Tokyo competition. And that's it on News Now on TV360 Nigeria. I am Anetta Felix. Thank you for watching.